Joining me now is one of the congresspeople on the Judiciary Committee, which will get to see the less redacted Mueller report, Democratic Congressman Joe Neguse of Colorado. Congressman, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us.
Good to be with you, Ali.
Let's just understand, this has been a little while since we've had this conversation about the redactions and Congress's need to see them. What's the argument that the Judiciary Committee has made that it needs to see the redacted information, and what do you think you'll see as a result?
Well, a couple things. I think, as you know, the argument was that ultimately the House was fully engaged and is engaged in an impeachment inquiry, and therefore, under Rule 6E, had every right to access these important materials as the committee and the committees, rather now, make a decision as to how to proceed. I would just say, I think you got the historical context right at the beginning of the program, but it's important for this victory not to be seen through a partisan lens. Ultimately, in my view, it's not a win for Democrats, but ultimately a win for the American people. It was a major victory for the Constitution and for the fundamental rule of law in our country for Judge Howell to ultimately conclude what we all knew to be true, which was that the House was engaged and is engaged in an impeachment inquiry, and that these ludicrous process arguments made by the Republicans really are untenable. And, I think the fact that Judge Howell, rejected these frivolous and in many cases spurious arguments made by the Department of Justice, to me, it's a good day for democracy. So ultimately, obviously, the committees are going to proceed under the path that we've chartered. It's going to be important for the Judiciary Committee to access these materials, and we'll go from there.
So you mentioned 6E, grand jury testimony. Tell me what you, generally speaking, because we don't have access to that as reporters, what do you expect to learn? Are there dots that you saw in the Mueller report that you believe will be connected because you get to see this otherwise redacted information?
Sure. So much of this is detailed in the litigation filings that the committee submitted in the district court litigation. Ultimately, there were a number of unanswered questions, as you know, a number of gaps that we believe could be filled by the grand jury materials, the evidence that was submitted before the grand jury. There are also, as you know, a number of questions that have popped up as to who testified before the jury and who did not, and some recent DOJ filings that created some further mystery around that particular question. So, look, I think it is important to just contextually remember. I mean, at the end of the day, the committee has to have access to this material, is entitled to this material under the rules of both the House and ultimately precedent, as was cited by Judge Howell. But right now, the focus should remain and will remain the abuse of power that the president engaged in with respect to the Ukraine scandal. As you know,
right. I want you to...
that conduct. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Congressman, draw a line for me then between those two, because the focus and the number of members of Congress who have said that they would vote in favor of an impeachment inquiry, which is well beyond the amount that would be the number that would be needed to open one, is about the abuse of power, generally speaking, related to Ukraine. What's the link now that you and your fellow Democrats will make between that inquiry and the Mueller report?
So it's a good question. The Speaker early on made clear that the six committees of jurisdiction would be proceeding under this impeachment inquiry, under an umbrella, so to speak. And so ultimately the focus, as I said, will be and should be on the Ukraine scandal and the realities of the president's abuse of power and his betrayal of the Constitution, in my view, when he sought to have a foreign power interfere in the presidential election in 2020 and ultimately undermining the integrity of our election. So I think Chairman Schiff has done a masterful job at gleaning significant evidence, much of which you described in the opening of your program. The other committees are going to continue to do their work. And as you know, much of that work is tied up in litigation, some of which we're discussing tonight. So that work is going to continue. I imagine the Department of Justice will appeal this decision. I would hope that they would not, but I have no illusions under this Attorney General, who, of course, is acting more like the president's personal attorney than an Attorney General and Chief Law Enforcement Officer. I imagine they'll proceed with an appeal. So we're going to follow the facts where they lead us, and that is important work that lays ahead before the Congress.
I was just checking my phone to make sure that appeal hasn't been filed yet, because I think you're right. It probably will happen. But thank you, Congressman. Good to see you again. Congressman Joe Neguse.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.